The door slam echoed throughout the entire Cleveland Browns facility. Equipment scattered across the floor. Profanity-laced screams that could be heard 3 rooms away. This wasn't just disappointment. This was pure, unfiltered rage from a third-round quarterback who just watched his NFL dreams get obliterated by a fifth-round afterthought. What you're about to witness is the most spectacular quarterback room implosion in recent NFL history, and it all started with 4 simple words from Kevin Stefanski: Sanders starts against Philadelphia. I'm about to take you inside the most dramatic 48 hours in Cleveland Browns history, where careers were made, dreams were shattered, and one player's meltdown confirmed exactly why he lost his starting job. If you think you know what happened, trust me, you don't know the half of it. Welcome back to NFL Report, where we dive deep into the stories the mainstream media won't tell you. What happened in Cleveland this week goes far beyond a simple depth chart adjustment. This is about organizational transformation, power structure realignment, and a franchise-altering moment that's sending shockwaves throughout the entire NFL. For the past month, I've been tracking this quarterback controversy through my sources inside the Browns organization, and what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you view both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. This isn't just about 2 quarterbacks competing for a starting job. This is about the brutal reality of professional football, where draft position means nothing, guaranteed money can't buy you playing time, and sometimes superior talent emerges from the most unexpected places. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why Gabriel's explosive reaction actually validated Stefanski's decision, how Sanders has completely transformed the Browns' locker room dynamics, and why Saturday's game against Philadelphia represents so much more than a preseason matchup. Picture this scene: it's Thursday afternoon, August 10th, inside the Cleveland Browns facility. The team has just finished another intense practice session, and players are filtering into the main meeting room for what they assume is a routine team meeting. Kevin Stefanski enters the room with a different energy than usual, more focused, more decisive. He scans the faces of his players, takes a deep breath, and delivers the news that would send shockwaves through the organization. Shedeur Sanders will be our starting quarterback against the Philadelphia Eagles this Saturday. The silence that followed was deafening. You could literally hear a pin drop in that room. But it wasn't the silence that told the story, it was what happened next. According to multiple sources who were present, Dillon Gabriel's face went through a transformation that witnesses described as watching someone's soul leave their body. The disbelief was immediate and obvious. His eyes widened, his jaw dropped slightly, and for about 10 seconds, he just sat there processing what he had just heard. But then came the anger. Gabriel's face flushed red, his hands clenched into fists, and witnesses say you could literally see the rage building inside him. He remained seated for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, and then he abruptly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Without saying a word to anyone, not to Stefanski, not to his teammates, not even to the coaching staff, he walked straight out of that meeting room. The door slam that followed wasn't just loud, it was violent. It echoed throughout the entire complex, and players later said it felt like the building shook. But Gabriel wasn't done. Sources tell me he went straight to his locker, and that's where the real explosion happened. Helmets went flying across the room. Equipment was scattered everywhere. One witness described it as looking like a tornado had hit the quarterback section of the locker room. The profanity-laced tirade that followed was directed at anyone within earshot. When veteran offensive lineman Joel Bitonio tried to approach him and calm him down, Gabriel reportedly screamed, "Don't touch me. This is politics. This is ownership interference." The verbal assault was so intense that Bitonio, a team captain and one of the most respected players in that locker room, just backed away with his hands up. But here's the most telling part of this entire meltdown. Gabriel's reaction actually confirmed everything the coaching staff had been quietly discussing about his maturity and leadership capabilities. Professional football demands composure under pressure, and Gabriel's explosion demonstrated exactly why he wasn't ready to lead this franchise. While he was having his tantrum, Sanders was already in the film room, studying Philadelphia's defensive tendencies, preparing for the opportunity he had earned through superior performance. The security cameras captured Gabriel speeding out of the parking lot, tires squealing, nearly colliding with an incoming delivery truck. This wasn't just disappointment, this was a complete professional meltdown that would have lasting consequences for his career. Within hours of his explosive exit from the Browns facility, reality began to set in for Dillon Gabriel. The adrenaline from his rage-fueled meltdown started to wear off, and he began to realize the magnitude of what he had just done. According to sources close to the situation, Gabriel spent that entire evening pacing around his apartment, replaying the events over and over in his mind, and slowly coming to the horrifying realization that he had just destroyed any remaining chance he had of salvaging his position with the team. The first sign of his regret came around 11 p.m. that same night, when his agent received a frantic phone call. Gabriel was reportedly in full panic mode, asking if there was any way to undo what had happened, if they could somehow spin the story, if there was any possibility of damage control. His agent, who had been in the business for over 2 decades, had never heard such desperation in a client's voice. The conversation lasted over an hour, with Gabriel alternating between anger at the situation and terror about his future. By Friday morning, Gabriel's camp was in full crisis management mode. His agent was frantically calling Browns officials, requesting emergency meetings, promising that Gabriel would apologize, that he would accept any role on the team, that he would do whatever it took to make things right. But the damage was already done. Stefanski's message had been delivered clearly. Professional responses are required regardless of circumstances, and Gabriel's meltdown had confirmed every concern the coaching staff had about his maturity and leadership capability. The most pathetic part of this entire situation was watching Gabriel attempt to return to the facility the next day as if nothing had happened. Sources describe him walking into the building with his head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone, trying to blend into the background. But you can't unring that bell. Every player, every coach, every staff member knew exactly what had transpired. The respect was gone, the trust was shattered, and his credibility as a leader was completely destroyed. What makes this even more devastating for Gabriel is that his reaction actually validated Sanders' selection in the most perfect way possible. While Gabriel was throwing equipment and screaming about politics, Sanders was demonstrating the exact qualities that championship teams need in their quarterback: composure, professionalism, and an unwavering focus on preparation. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or more damning for Gabriel's future prospects. The attempted damage control continued throughout the week, with Gabriel's representatives reaching out to media members, trying to plant stories about unfair treatment and rushed decisions. But the narrative was already set. Gabriel had shown his true character under pressure, and it wasn't the character of a franchise quarterback. His instant regret was palpable, but in professional football, some mistakes can't be undone. His explosive reaction had written the final chapter of his Cleveland Browns story, and everyone in that building knew it. While Dillon Gabriel was having his public meltdown and subsequent panic attack, Shedeur Sanders was providing a masterclass in professional composure and leadership. The contrast between how these two quarterbacks handled the same situation tells you everything you need to know about why Stefanski made his decision. When Sanders received the news that he would be starting against Philadelphia, his response was everything you'd want from a franchise quarterback. According to witnesses in that meeting room, Sanders simply nodded when Stefanski made the announcement, stood up, and said, "Thank you, Coach. I won't let you down." That was it. No celebration, no gloating, no acknowledgement of the competition he had just won. Just professional acceptance of responsibility and an immediate understanding of the expectations that came with the role. While Gabriel was storming out and slamming doors, Sanders was already mentally preparing for the challenge ahead. But here's what really impressed the coaching staff and veteran players. Sanders' first move after the meeting wasn't to call his family or celebrate with friends. He went straight to the film room and began studying Philadelphia's defensive tendencies. By the time Gabriel was having his parking lot tantrum, Sanders was already 3 hours deep into game preparation, taking notes, identifying potential weaknesses, and developing a game plan for Saturday's matchup. The leadership qualities that Sanders displayed in the hours following the announcement were remarkable for any quarterback, let alone a fifth-round rookie. He personally approached every offensive player, thanking them for their support throughout training camp and asking for their continued commitment moving forward. He didn't demand respect. He earned it through his actions and his approach to the opportunity. Veteran receiver Amari Cooper later told teammates that Sanders' maturity in handling the situation reminded him of some of the best quarterbacks he had played with throughout his career. "This kid gets it," Cooper reportedly said. "He understands that the real work starts now, not when you get the job." That kind of endorsement from a veteran player carries enormous weight in an NFL locker room. Perhaps most impressively, Sanders made a point of approaching the offensive linemen individually, discussing protection schemes, communication preferences, and building the chemistry that's essential for quarterback success. While Gabriel was isolating himself and burning bridges, Sanders was strengthening relationships and building the foundation for future success. The coaching staff was particularly impressed with how Sanders handled the media obligations that came with being named the starter. His responses were thoughtful, humble, and focused on team success rather than personal achievement. He deflected credit to his teammates and coaches while acknowledging the opportunity he had been given. This wasn't just good media training. This was genuine leadership and maturity that you rarely see from rookie quarterbacks. By the end of that first day as the starter, Sanders had already begun transforming the culture around the quarterback position. Players were gravitating toward his leadership, coaches were energized by his preparation, and the entire organization was beginning to believe that they had found something special in their fifth-round selection. To understand why Kevin Stefanski made this decision, you need to understand what happened during the week leading up to the announcement. This wasn't a spontaneous choice or a reaction to one bad practice from Gabriel. This was the culmination of 7 days of absolute domination by Shedeur Sanders that made the coaching staff's decision inevitable. Let's start with the numbers, because they tell a story that's impossible to ignore. During team periods throughout that final week of evaluation, Sanders completed an astounding 87% of his passes. That's not just good for a rookie, that's elite by any standard. Gabriel, meanwhile, managed 76%, which is respectable but clearly inferior when you're competing for the same job. But the completion percentage only tells part of the story. The real difference was in the explosive plays. Every single day of that evaluation week, Sanders generated 4 explosive plays exceeding 30 yards. These weren't just completions. These were game-changing throws that demonstrated his ability to stretch the field and create big play opportunities. Gabriel, in contrast, produced maybe 1 or 2 explosive plays per day and often went entire practice sessions without generating anything that would be considered a game-changer. But the most telling difference wasn't in the statistics, it was in how the defense prepared for each quarterback. When Gabriel was running the offense, defensive players executed their assignments, maintained their discipline, and played within the scheme. It was textbook football, but it was also predictable and manageable. When Sanders took over, everything changed. Defensive players were constantly communicating about potential scrambles, unexpected decisions, and improvised plays that could break down even the best designed coverage. The fear factor that Sanders generated was immediately obvious to anyone watching practice. Defensive backs were playing with different urgency, linebackers were more aggressive in their coverage, and the pass rush was more intense because they knew they had a limited window to get to Sanders before he could create something out of nothing. That kind of respect from the defense is something you can't teach. It's an innate quality that separates good quarterbacks from great ones. Veteran defensive players began approaching coaches after practice, asking about Sanders' development timeline and expressing genuine concern about having to face him in practice every day. One defensive captain reportedly told Stefanski, "This kid is going to be a problem for a lot of teams, and I mean that in the best way possible." When your own defense is worried about your quarterback's potential, you know you have something special. The command presence that Sanders displayed during that evaluation week was perhaps the most impressive aspect of his performance. While Gabriel appeared mechanical and scripted in his communication, Sanders commanded the huddle with a veteran presence that seemed impossible for a rookie. His pre-snap adjustments were confident and accurate, his audibles were decisive, and his ability to get the offense lined up quickly and efficiently impressed coaches who had been working with quarterbacks for decades. By the end of that evaluation week, the decision was obvious to everyone in the building except Gabriel himself. The announcement of Sanders as the starting quarterback created seismic shifts in the Browns locker room that went far beyond the typical depth chart adjustment. What happened in the hours and days following Stefanski's decision revealed the true character of both quarterbacks and provided a fascinating glimpse into how NFL teams really function when faced with dramatic change. The veteran player's response was immediate and telling. Within hours of the announcement, you could see the gravitational pull toward Sanders beginning. It wasn't orchestrated or mandated by coaches, it was organic and natural. Professional athletes have an innate ability to recognize winners, and they understand the difference between potential and performance. Sanders represented possibility and upward trajectory, while Gabriel had come to represent limitation and missed opportunities. One of the most powerful moments came when defensive captain Myles Garrett addressed the team the day after the announcement. According to sources, Garrett stood up in the team meeting and said, "We rally behind QB1. That's Shedeur now. Personal feelings are irrelevant. Championships matter, and we're going to support whoever gives us the best chance to win." The message resonated throughout the facility and sent a clear signal about how the team's leadership viewed the decision. The offensive player's response was even more dramatic. Receivers who had been diplomatically supportive of both quarterbacks throughout training camp suddenly became vocal advocates for Sanders. Amari Cooper was overheard telling teammates, "Finally, we have a quarterback who can get us the ball where we need it, when we need it." The offensive linemen began holding separate meetings to discuss protection schemes and communication preferences specifically tailored to Sanders' style of play. Perhaps most damaging for Gabriel was how quickly he became isolated within his own position group. The backup quarterbacks, who had previously maintained neutral relationships with both competitors, began gravitating toward Sanders as well. They recognized that their own futures were tied to the success of the starter, and they wanted to be associated with the winning side of this competition. The coaching staff's response was equally revealing. Position coaches throughout the building began adjusting their approaches to accommodate Sanders' strengths and preferences. The offensive coordinator started designing plays that highlighted Sanders' unique skill set, while the quarterback coach began spending additional time with Sanders on advanced concepts and game management situations. Even the support staff began treating Sanders differently. Equipment managers adjusted locker arrangements to give Sanders more prominent placement. Media relations updated all promotional materials and depth charts. The cafeteria staff began accommodating Sanders' dietary preferences and meal timing requests. These might seem like small details, but in the NFL, everything communicates status and importance. The most telling aspect of the locker room transformation was how quickly Gabriel became an afterthought. Players who had previously engaged with him in conversations and team activities began unconsciously excluding him from discussions about game plans, strategy, and team goals. It wasn't malicious, it was simply the natural result of organizational hierarchy asserting itself. Sanders was the future, and everyone wanted to be aligned with that future. Saturday's preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles represents far more than a typical exhibition matchup. This is Shedeur Sanders' official debut as an NFL starting quarterback, and the stakes couldn't be higher for everyone involved. The national spotlight will be focused on Cleveland, and the performance we see will likely determine the trajectory of multiple careers and the future direction of the entire franchise. For Sanders, this game represents the culmination of everything he's worked towards since being drafted in the 5th round. All the preparation, all the training camp battles, all the leadership moments have led to this opportunity. But the pressure is immense. He's not just representing himself, He's carrying the hopes of an organization that has been searching for quarterback stability for decades. The Browns haven't had a franchise quarterback since the return of the franchise, and the entire city is desperate for someone to finally solve this position. The Philadelphia Eagles aren't going to make this easy for the rookie. Their defensive coordinator has publicly stated that they plan to play their starters longer than usual in this preseason game, sending a clear message that they want to test Sanders immediately. They're going to bring complex pressure packages, disguise coverages, and everything they can throw at a rookie quarterback to see how he responds under fire. For Dillon Gabriel, Saturday represents the final nail in the coffin of his Cleveland career. He'll be relegated to clipboard duty, forced to watch from the sideline as the player who replaced him gets his moment in the spotlight. The humiliation will be amplified by the national television audience and primetime scheduling. Every camera shot of Gabriel on the sideline will serve as a reminder of his spectacular fall from grace, and his body language and demeanor will be scrutinized by analysts and fans alike. The broader implications for the Browns organization are staggering. If Sanders performs well, it validates every decision the front office has made since draft night. Owner Jimmy Haslam's controversial declaration about Sanders becomes prescient rather than meddlesome. General Manager Andrew Berry's draft strategy gets vindicated. Kevin Stefanski's coaching authority gets reinforced. But if Sanders struggles, the criticism will be swift and merciless, with every mistake being magnified and every poor decision being questioned. What makes this situation even more fascinating is the psychological aspect of how each quarterback is handling the pressure leading up to Saturday's game. The contrast between Sanders and Gabriel couldn't be more stark, and it provides incredible insight into what separates successful NFL quarterbacks from those who flame out. Sanders appears to be thriving under the increased pressure and attention. His preparation has intensified exponentially since being named the starter, with film study sessions extending past midnight and extra throwing sessions with receivers becoming daily occurrences. But rather than seeming overwhelmed by the responsibility, he appears energized by it. Sports psychologists would recognize this as a classic example of someone who performs better under pressure rather than being crushed by it. The support system around Sanders has been crucial to his mental preparation. His father, Deion Sanders, has remained publicly silent while privately providing guidance and perspective. His family's presence at practice has provided emotional stability and normalcy despite the extraordinary circumstances. His girlfriend has been managing media requests and protecting his focus, creating a private sanctuary away from the chaos of NFL stardom. Gabriel's psychological state, meanwhile, has deteriorated dramatically. The biometric data tracked by the team's medical staff tells a concerning story. His heart rate variability has decreased significantly, indicating elevated stress levels. His sleep quality has plummeted, with multiple nights of disrupted sleep patterns. His cortisol levels have spiked, showing classic symptoms of chronic stress and anxiety. Even his appetite has decreased, which is often a sign of depression or severe anxiety in athletes. The isolation that Gabriel is experiencing has compounded his psychological struggles. His parents are geographically distant and struggling to provide meaningful support. His girlfriend has become increasingly frustrated with the situation and the uncertainty about their future. His college coaches have reached out offering encouragement, but their words feel hollow given the current reality of his situation. Perhaps most damaging to Gabriel's mental state is the constant reminder of his diminished status. Every interaction at the facility reinforces his new position in the hierarchy. Every meeting, every practice, every team activity serves as a reminder that he's no longer the presumptive starter but rather a backup quarterback whose future with the team is uncertain at best. The psychological evaluation of both players reveals fundamental differences in how they process adversity and pressure. Sanders has demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability, using challenges as motivation rather than obstacles. Gabriel has shown vulnerability to pressure and a tendency to internalize setbacks in ways that compound their negative effects. This psychological differential explains why the coaching staff's decision goes beyond just physical talent and performance metrics. Mental fortitude and the ability to handle pressure are essential qualities for NFL quarterbacks, and the events of this week have provided a perfect laboratory for evaluating both players' psychological makeup under extreme stress. The Cleveland Browns quarterback situation is sending shockwaves throughout the NFL, and the implications extend far beyond just one team's depth chart. What's happening in Cleveland is challenging conventional wisdom about draft position, development timelines, and how organizations should evaluate quarterback talent. Every NFL front office is watching this situation closely because it represents a fundamental shift in how teams might approach quarterback development in the future. The traditional model suggests that higher draft picks deserve longer development periods and more patience from coaching staffs. But Cleveland's willingness to promote a fifth-round pick over a third-round selection after just one training camp suggests that pure meritocracy might be more important than draft capital protection. This decision is particularly significant because it's happening under Kevin Stefanski, who has built his reputation on developing quarterbacks and making sound personnel decisions. If Sanders succeeds, it will validate a more aggressive approach to quarterback competition that other teams might adopt. If he fails, it will serve as a cautionary tale about abandoning traditional development timelines. The scouting community is already conducting postmortems on how Sanders lasted until the fifth round while Gabriel went in the third. What did evaluators miss about Sanders' potential? What red flags about Gabriel were overlooked or dismissed? These questions will influence how teams evaluate quarterbacks in future drafts, potentially leading to significant changes in scouting priorities and evaluation criteria. For Gabriel, the immediate future looks bleak, but his career isn't necessarily over. NFL history is filled with quarterbacks who found success after disappointing starts with their original teams. However, his explosive reaction to losing the starting job has damaged his reputation throughout the league. Teams value character and professionalism, and Gabriel's meltdown will follow him wherever he goes next. The trade market for Gabriel is virtually non-existent at this point. His value has plummeted from a potential mid-round pick to maybe a conditional seventh-rounder or simply salary relief for Cleveland. Teams that might have been interested in acquiring a young quarterback with starting experience are now concerned about his maturity and ability to handle adversity. Sanders, meanwhile, is positioned to become one of the most closely watched rookies in the NFL. If he performs well on Saturday and continues to develop throughout the preseason, he could find himself in the conversation for Offensive Rookie of the Year. The narrative of a fifth-round pick outperforming higher-drafted quarterbacks is exactly the kind of story that captures national attention and creates star power. The Cleveland Browns organization is betting everything on Sanders being their franchise quarterback of the future. The decision to start him immediately rather than allowing him to develop behind Gabriel shows their confidence in his abilities and their belief that he represents their best chance for immediate success. It's a bold move that will either be remembered as brilliant or catastrophic, with very little middle ground. What we've witnessed in Cleveland this week is professional football at its most brutal and beautiful. The meritocracy of the NFL has functioned exactly as it should. Talent has risen to the top regardless of draft position, politics, or expectations. Shedeur Sanders has earned his opportunity through superior performance, leadership, and professionalism. Dillon Gabriel has lost his through inferior play and a spectacular failure to handle adversity with maturity. Saturday's game against Philadelphia will be the first chapter in what could be a remarkable story. Sanders has all the tools to succeed at the NFL level, and he's demonstrated the mental fortitude necessary to handle the pressure that comes with being a franchise quarterback. His preparation has been exemplary, his leadership has been natural, and his performance has been consistently excellent. For Gabriel, this represents a cautionary tale about how quickly things can change in professional sports. His talent was never in question, but his response to competition and adversity revealed character flaws that made him unsuitable for the leadership role that comes with being an NFL starting quarterback. His explosive reaction to losing the job confirmed every concern the coaching staff had about his maturity and professionalism. The broader implications of this situation will be felt throughout the NFL for years to come. Cleveland's willingness to promote talent over draft position could influence how other teams approach quarterback development. The success or failure of this decision will be studied by front offices across the league. As we head into Saturday's game, remember that you're witnessing history in the making. This could be the beginning of a new era for the Cleveland Browns, or it could be another chapter in their long history of quarterback disappointments. But one thing is certain, the decision has been made, the die has been cast, and Shedeur Sanders now carries the hopes and dreams of an entire franchise on his shoulders. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because I'll be breaking down every moment of Saturday's game and analyzing what it means for both quarterbacks' futures. Drop a comment below and let me know your prediction for how Sanders will perform in his debut. Will he validate Cleveland's faith in him, or will this decision backfire spectacularly? The answer is just days away, and I can't wait to see how this incredible story unfolds. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll dive deep into the aftermath of what promises to be one of the most watched preseason games in recent memory. This is just the beginning of what could be an incredible journey for Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns.